What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to My Social Life. This is the podcast where you can hear the real stories behind the people on social media. I'm your host, Jacob Kelly. As always, today's podcast is powered by Trufan. Before we get into today's conversation with Emily Mcguire, there's a couple things that we need to go over first. Number one, if you enjoyed today's podcast, please consider leaving a rating and a review. The more positive ratings and reviews we get, the more it helps the people find the show, and it really helps to grow the community that we're developing. And if you're one of those people that have recently found the podcast, welcome. I'm very excited to have you here. Make sure you subscribe and stay tuned for future episodes. I put up brand new interviews every single Monday. Brand New Takeaways is an audio exclusive where I sit down and break down the most recent podcast episode of the week every single Thursday. And last but not least, if you enjoyed today's podcast, be sure to share it to your Instagram story, tag myself at the Jacob Kelly, and I'll feature you on my account and send you a message as well. And now, without further ado, let's get to my conversation with Emily Mcguire. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to My Social Life. This is the podcast where you can hear the real stories behind the people on social media. I'm your host, Jacob Kelly. As always, today's podcast is powered by Trufan. And today on the podcast, we are joined by Emily Mcguire. Emily is the coffee-loving, trashy TV-watching, working mama lady boss behind Flourish and Grit, an email marketing and automation studio helping build flourishing and profitable relationships with smart email marketing. Emily has sent thousands of email campaigns and earned over 80 million in revenue from promotional and automated email campaigns. And I'm very excited to have her here on the podcast today. Emily, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. I want to start. I want to go all the way back to the beginning. I'm curious as to know, what did you want to be growing up? Because from my understanding, I'm assuming it wasn't to be an email marketer.
It was right at the womb. I was like, give me email. No, so God, I don't even remember. The first thing I remember wanting to be when I grew up was a firefighter. Yes, until I somehow watched the movie Backdraft, which was totally inappropriate for my age group. And then clearly, no. But yeah, I actually wanted to be a teacher when I was younger. And that was a goal for a long time until I graduated college at the height of the recession about 10 years ago. God, it's been 10 years ago. And jobs were not available. So, I did what I always did. I, just took whatever job would pay my bills until I got a chance to hit reset by going to grad school. So I got a master's in communication and learned all the communication strategy, all that fun stuff, and applied it to digital marketing. So that was fun. And I started an email like anybody does. I was a digital marketing generalist, and somebody was like, you do computers, right? You can do this other thing too. It's the same. But it's not the same. As much as I enjoyed doing social media, I found I loved email more. And so started down that path, got another job only doing email marketing for a large e-commerce company. And then that was in the southeastern United States, and moved back to Michigan after I had my son and decided to start my own business.
I kind of want to unpack all of that. So I want to go back to your first time in college. You minored in creative writing. Is that correct?
Communication and creative writing.
Creative writing.
Mm-hmm.
And I've heard you say that initially academia kind of ruined your relationship with writing, and I'm curious as to why that was.
I mean, it's very cerebral, and it's very formulaic, and you have to fit into a box of tradition. And as much as I enjoyed what I learned in academia, it takes academia, I don't know, academia is probably 15 years behind current practices, right? Because they have to, it's peer-reviewed research. That takes a long time. And so, yeah, keeping up with what's going on in the world is not academia's forte. So yeah, I learned how to write for a professor. And that's not a lot of fun.
Yeah, and then so I'm curious, you ended up going back to get your master's, and I'm curious why you decided to go back despite having not the greatest time going through college the first time.
I didn't really understand what I had, it's kind of like, uh, good Lord, this is going to get real, real deep.
That's okay.
It's so I don't think I totally understood the full extent of how I experienced academia the first time around. And it's not until you really get into grad school where you sort of peek behind the curtains and see what's happening and completely, I guess, understood my place in it and who I was trying to please. Uh, and I wanted to be the smart kid in the room, and I thought the way to do that was through academia. And I found out it's not. There's lots of ways, so many ways. So yeah, like I said, I enjoyed what I was able to learn in grad school, but I would never go back.
Mhm. No way. So like looking back, like if you were to start over again at like 18, 19, going to school, would you go to school or would you take a different path now?
I would I would have still gone to school because I didn't know anything. I grew up in a family that didn't have it was not a white collar family, but it wasn't really a blue collar family. I don't know. It was very weird. So I didn't know what was out there. And I didn't really have the mentorship to help navigate that. And I didn't know who to ask about how to do anything like that. Nor did it ever occur to me to ask. I didn't know that was a thing. So I would have done like the tradition. I think I still would have done the traditional route because I just didn't know. And I think that helped me learn about like what's out there. What do you think is out there versus what's in reality? So yeah, I did enjoy grad school because it felt like I got the undergrad experience as a grad student. I loved it. So
All
yeah.
right. And then you mentioned how after grad school is when you got your first job in social media, and that was a social media coordinator at Southern Season, if I'm not mistaken. And did you enjoy social media at that time, or was it kind of just something you knew you were doing at the beginning, and then you knew eventually you were going to move on from social?
So in grad school, I was studying. I did research on social media movements. That's what I wanted to research, is how are people organizing online, um, and so I had a very deep interest in it. And yeah, that's what I wanted to do. I got some internships. I did again, like I did a lot of research papers around it, and then I got into it, and again, like it's one of those things where you don't totally understand um what's going on until like you go into a place, like into a business, and every business is different, right? They have different priorities, different budgets, all that kind of stuff. And um it was exciting. It was an exciting time to be at that company, but I really found out I really liked email, because it does really have that opportunity to follow people along their relationship with you. Um, so yeah, that's what drew me to it, really.
So when you initially get email kind of put on your plate, is it an exciting thing because you realize social media is not exactly what you want to do, or is it just like, man, this is another thing that I got to do now, and over time, it's something you kind of fell in love with?
No, I have a real problem with wanting to learn new things. I really enjoy it, and that gives me a little bit of a shiny object syndrome sometimes. I'm like, "Oh, I wanna do this, and I wanna do that, and do this," and, that's sort of biting me in the butt being an entrepreneur, because I can't do it all anymore. But yeah, so at that time, I was very excited to learn something new and really dig in and own that channel for the company.
And then so ultimately end up moving to an email marketing specialist position with PHE. Was that kind of by design to find a job that was just all email all the time?
Yeah, yeah, when I was really excited to find that, and surprisingly, I mean, yeah, surprisingly, it can be kinda hard to find very specialized roles like that, especially, locally where I was, and, yeah, so it was very exciting, and I got to learn from some really, seasoned pros there, so, yeah, I loved it.
What are some of the things that they taught you early on? Because I'd have been still pretty early on in your email marketing career. So what are some of those foundational things that they taught you at that time?
So, I mean, really how to construct an offer, how to so they came from a background that's more like direct mail sort of mindset, right? And transferred it into email. And so they were like, they've been doing it for decades. And so it was really fascinating to learn that foundational structure of what does it look like to create an offer? How do you package it? How do you give it the attention it needs? Um, and yeah, that those foundational pieces were invaluable.
And was it then while your time at that job, did you start experimenting with taking clients on the side and things like that, or did that come after?
Yeah, so yes. So when I ended up moving, I contracted with them for a while and then, sort of built everything around that.
And so it started as Email by Emily, right?
Yes, yes. I thought I was being real cute.
And so Uh, and so I'm curious, at what point then did it become apparent that you could take this full time? Because you were contracting with them for a little bit, doing your own thing on the side. At what point do you realize that, oh, I can do this and make this my full time income now?
Yeah, well, when I started getting really overwhelmed and started raising my rates and realizing, oh, people will pay for this. And it's like, how can I turn that down? So yeah, when the opportunity cost became too great to stay doing what I was doing, it was time to move on.
And despite knowing then that you have your clients, you have more and more clients every day, you're able to raise your rates, people are still paying you. So it makes sense to take that next step. But is taking that next step still a scary thing to do, or were you almost reassured with everything and it was not a difficult thing?
Oh my God, it was so hard. It was so hard because like the people I worked with were amazing. I worked there when I had my son, and they were just an incredible group of people, and I was so grateful to who they were as people and to how much they had helped me grow personally and professionally. And it was the best job I'd ever had. Um, and so yeah, it was very hard. I think it was the only time I ever really moved on from a job. Um, and I wasn't like screaming to get out of there. You know what I'm saying? It was very difficult.
And so bring me back to the first day where you wake up and you're your own boss. Is there panic? Is there relief? Like, what is that feeling like day one?
Oh, terrifying. So terrifying. Yeah, being in charge of my own income, like that is a lot of pressure. And yeah, so scary. It's like I tell people entrepreneurship is like having a kid, like or having a baby. It's like very high highs, very low lows. You know what I'm saying? It's just oh yeah, so great and so terrible.
And what do you wish you knew, just for people listening? What are some things you wish you knew before taking the jump? Like, do you wish you'd built up a longer runway in terms of savings or anything like that? Or is there anything you wish you had prepared in advance? Like, what are some things you wish you had done when you first took the jump?
Yes, savings for sure. I wish I had built up more savings, and I wish I had asked for help sooner. So like coaching and things like that. Um, yeah, those are the two things. And never work for free. Because I didn't, it takes a while to get the confidence up to really believe that your work is valuable. And so I would do work for referrals or testimonials from people, and it doesn't set up an equitable relationship. It doesn't set up a partnership, and it's almost destined to doom from the outset. So yeah, it's a valuable lesson, but it's a hard one.
And talk to me a little bit more about asking for help sooner. Cause I feel like as an entrepreneur, especially I know up till recently you were a solopreneur, it was just you at the company. I know you have a VA now, but I feel like with solopreneurs specifically, it's hard to ask for help because you're so used to just doing everything yourself. So how are you able to come to that, not necessarily realization? You might have known it for a long time, but not necessarily wanted to admit it to yourself. So when did you finally make the decision to seek help, get coaching, bring people on?
So I So in addition to being, well, so the problem with wanting to learn all the things is that I am also a course junkie. And so I kept buying courses thinking like, oh, this will teach me what I need to know. And I think I've heard, I don't think I'm unique in this, that I bought way too many courses and was like, oh, these aren't doing what I had hoped they would do. Me spending whatever $200-300 or even like a couple grand on a course, I could have invested that in personalized coaching, um, tailored to me. Because I mean, I've actually taken some really great courses. I've learned a lot of really great stuff, but when it comes to structuring your business, like it's very personal, and you really have to dig into what's going to work for you and the type of clients you want to work with. And a course isn't going to help you do all of that. It might like get you started, but it's not going to help you dig in as deeply as you want to.
And talk to me about the name Flourish and Grit. I love the name. Where did you get the idea? What does it mean? Can you kind of talk to me a little more about the name?
Yeah, so I love the word flourish. It's just such a good word. And I, as much as I'm somebody who believes or likes to believe that I have a lot of grit, right? A lot of resolve, like you mentioned, being a solopreneur, like I have always prided myself on being able to do things on my own, being able to figure things out, get my hands dirty. But at a certain point, you hit a wall. And in order to truly flourish, right, you need help, you need a community. And so it's two sides of the same coin, right? And so for me, it's, you grit got you so far, but in order to truly flourish, to take the next step, you have to ask for help. And so, yeah, that's been my journey. Oh, I've learned that lesson way too many times. And I know other people who've been through the same.
Oh, I love that. And so I've heard you say in the past that email automation is the hidden marketing powerhouse. Why is that?
Yeah, so it has the power to take advantage of data, right? So, if you have Google Analytics on your site and you're tracking behavior and visitors and all that kind of stuff, that's really great information to have. But um, if you have the ability to follow up with somebody based on that behavior, because you have a contact record for them, right? An email address, it's even more powerful. So anytime somebody takes an action with your website, they submit a form, they view a page a few times, they put something in their shopping cart and they don't check out, right? Like those are all really useful pieces of information that you can then capitalize on, right? Because they're super engaged with you at that moment in time to send follow up messaging. And there are certain automated email campaigns that make, in the e commerce world, they have like a 25% conversion rate. They're insanely effective. And I it's sort of like the back end engine that's sort of humming along that nobody pays attention to, right? Until it breaks. And I'm sure a lot of back end devs can relate to that. Just sort of plugging away, doing the thing in the background, and people don't really understand what's going on until it doesn't work anymore.
But with it being a powerhouse too, I've heard a stat, it's something like 38 to 1 ROI with email marketing. So with numbers like that, with again, like you said, 25% conversion rate with some e-com businesses, why is it the hidden powerhouse? Why isn't it the forefront? Why are people sleeping on email marketing?
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that people take for granted. You're in your email every day, most people are, and you're sending and receiving emails day in and day out. And so people don't really think about how to use it strategically, right? Because it's just sort of part of your everyday life, sort of just blends in the background. On top of that, unfortunately, there are a lot of examples of email marketing done poorly. People get very annoyed quickly when people are being too intrusive, with email. So, so yeah, it can have a bad name for itself, because there are so many bad examples of it. But again, when it's doing its job, and doing it really well, you don't notice it, you know? So I don't think people really see it. It's not, there aren't email influencers like Kardashians of email, right? Are Kardashians still a thing?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, they are.
Okay. Are they finally done? um, yeah, so and like people get really overwhelmed with it because it's just this whole other world to figure out. It's not super visible, and yeah, it's a bit mysterious and overwhelming to some folks.
Mhm. And so then when you're pitching for potential clients, is just hearing everything you just said as to why people aren't paying attention to it, is a lot of your pitching revolved around education and educating the client as to why email is so important?
Yeah. And because, yeah, people they don't get it. And especially with email automation, right? Like, um, the potential is there. It's just one of those things. If you've never seen it before, you're not going to understand it. And so, and then the other piece of that is a lot of people, or a lot of businesses, shockingly, don't look at their analytics, right? Like they don't look at, how people are behaving on their website, or where their subscribers are coming from, or any of that customer journey stuff. They're not paying attention to it. And so it takes me digging into it and pulling that information to the surface for the light bulbs to start going off, and people being like, oh, I see now, like I've had lots of that, which is fun. That's a fun thing to do.
And is there a specific type of client or industry that you try to work in, or is it a pretty broad spectrum?
Yeah, so I have so e-commerce is, my background. It's what I know a lot about. But so yeah, I work with e-commerce folks. I work with professional services people. I used to think B2B marketing was really boring, but it's actually really fun because the buying cycle tends to be so much longer. And so you have to nurture so much more. And so I love that relationship building. So yeah, professional services, tech, SaaS companies, very similar strategies, just with small tweaks here and there. So yeah, those are sort of where I play.
And then when you do work with clients, is it more so like you'll come in one time, set everything up for them so that it can automate in the background, or are you on a retainer and working with them month to month?
Yeah, so some clients just need somebody to come in and audit and set things up for them. So I definitely work on a project basis with some folks. But and then other people, I'm managing their entire email ecosystem monthly. So and like building and writing and sending out emails. So yeah, I do both, and it's pluses and minuses to both, right?
So is there any specific criteria you're looking for when you're bringing on new clients, especially at this point where you're so busy, you can kind of pick and choose who you're working with? Is there like they need to be already doing email, they just need to improve it, or people who haven't really started email and it's a fresh slate? Like, is there any specific like boxes you're trying to check when working with specific clients?
Yeah, so they have to have a list. They have to have an email list. Um, Email list grow. So what ends up happening is when somebody doesn't have a list, is like that's a lot of momentum to get off the ground, and often they don't have the budget to do something like that. So I'll do like essentially coaching with those folks. But yeah, have a list. They need to have at least one marketing person on staff. A team is obviously better, because that means that they've figured out some sort of marketing operations, right? Like project management, things like that. Because I mean, I do project management, but oh man, that's a lot of work. But yeah, they have to have a list. They have to have a couple marketing folks, at least one, and they have to have a website, which you would think would be a given, but it's not. They have to have they have to have a good website, not just something that's been scrappily thrown together. Because I mean, email thrives off of a really good website. If you've got a good data structure for your website, you've got a good user experience, like email is going to just take off from there. So yeah, having those foundational pieces really make email shine.
Mhm. And you said that they have to have an existing email list. So I'm curious if, with a lot of the brands you work with, they've kind of let their email list go to the wayside. Like I had a guy on here probably a few months back. His name was Graydon Ursel, and he runs an agency that specializes in just coming in and re-engaging the existing database because companies aren't doing that. Have you noticed that that's a huge opportunity that a lot of brands aren't taking advantage of?
Yes, that's a lot of who I work with are people who they have an email list, it's been growing, they set up a form years ago or whatever, and it's just sort of gone on from there. And they're like, oh, I guess I should be doing something with this. So yeah, that's a lot of what I do. And people who are like, who've gotten just like sort of stuck, they've plateaued with their email and they're not sure where to go next. So yeah, those two things. And yeah, that's a tricky strategy, re-engaging, because you don't know how many of those email addresses are dead weight, or don't like they're not active anymore, and that can cause all kinds of back end issues. So yeah, that's pretty smart that he specializes in just that.
Yeah, they do that. They do it with through email and they do texting as well. That's kind of they do a combination of the both. But I'm curious from your perspective, what does that first initial point of contact look like when you're re-engaging a database? Because they might not have had contact from this brand in months, even years. If they just set the form up, forgot it. And I feel like for some brands in that situation, they don't get started because they don't know how to restart. It's been so long they don't know how to re-engage. So like, what's that first point of contact really look like?
I mean, it's basically reintroducing yourself to your audience. It's being candid and transparent, and because just it this is the thing. So it's like people who they don't have a welcome series set up, right? So a welcome series is when somebody signs up for an email list, and then they start getting these emails introducing them to the brand, confirming their action they took with them, introducing them to all of the things, right? Um, and if you don't have a series like that, somebody signs up for your emails, and the very next email they get from you is, here's a sale on all these things, or here's this article and updates about our company. And it's like, I'd never even met you to begin with in the inbox, right? And so it's very it's disorienting almost, that you're just suddenly thrown into the middle of a conversation you didn't know you were having. And so re-engaging, you have to warm up your audience again in the inbox, even if they follow you elsewhere, even if they know you elsewhere. You still have to think of the email channel as a different arena to talk to your customers and warm them up.
I have a bunch more of specific email questions here, but before we really get into them, could you, in theory, answer every single question with "it depends" and you need to test it first? Because I feel like it's so different brand to brand.
Yes, it is. Absolutely. And I've worked in with so many brands or so many different types of industries. And even for one brand, testing to different segments gets different results. So yeah, it's you have to find out what works best for you. And best practices aren't really best practices, right? They're just a keyword search term. They're a good baseline to like start experimenting and get you ideas, but yeah, they're not generalizable.
And so, in your thousands of campaigns that you've ran, are there any cold, hard truths that you've seen through all your testing that is pretty much an applicable truth to all brands when it comes to email marketing?
Ooh, that's a great question. I would say, yeah, a couple things. One is having a clear, visible call to action, right? Whether that's a button, or if you don't have a skilled designer on the team, just a hyperlinked piece of text or a bit of text that's big and bold, and people know, like, oh, I'm supposed to go look for this thing and click it, those sort of things. So yeah, call to action. not doing so. A mistake I see a lot of people make is they only put content in their emails and they don't give any information about how to become a customer. So content marketing is great, but if it doesn't lead anywhere, you're just sort of just dumping stuff in people's inboxes, right? You have to lead them to the next step. There's another thing that I see immediately improve emails. Um, and purchase lists are almost always going to cause you a nightmare. You might do well with them for a little bit. You might see some good results for a little bit if you do it really, really, really well, and it's a really hard nut to crack. But uh, in the long run, unless you are some really skilled person with servers and all that fun stuff, it's going to cause a huge mess. Yeah.
And so with buying emails, is that like, so I live in Canada and I don't think you can actually buy lists here. I think with the
Yeah. No.
anti-spam legislation. So is that
Mhm.
literally just like buying a list of users that have never even heard of your brand and sending them an email and hoping they open it and convert somehow?
Yep.
Oh
Yep.
man.
Yeah, cold emailing. It's a whole strategy that still exists in the US. Not in a lot, well, yeah, obviously in Canada it doesn't, and in the EU, it's not a thing. So it is it's so hard. The inbox is already crowded. And if you're getting email from somebody who you've never heard of before, why would you open it? Like yeah, you have to be very, very clever, and that means you're very, very expensive. And yeah, and it can just cause a whole host of issues with your sender reputation and getting blacklisted and all the things. It's just, yeah, yeah, a whole Pandora's box.
I want to change gears a little bit here. I was wondering if you could share what your opinion is on newsletters.
Yeah, so I have lots of those. I have lots of opinions. But yeah, so going back to the call to action thing, like it's a huge I just newsletters are from the days of direct mail, right? When people were literally sending paper newsletters out about their business. And that is a bygone era. People do not sit down and read pieces of paper front to back with 10 million articles in them. We live in a digital world where people are confronted with distractions every minute of the day. And so when people come to me with their frustrations about email, right? They're like, I'm sending emails and I'm not getting any results. What am I doing wrong? Come to find out they're sending these newsletters with 5 to 12 articles that direct people in a million different directions. And people skim emails, they skim digital media, they skim websites. So if you are packing an email full of content, you're just asking people to do stuff, right? You're asking them to spend their time with your content. And that can be really overwhelming. And what they don't do then is say, hey, here's how all this content applies to what I do, what my business does, and what we provide our customers. And so if you're interested in that, here's how to become a customer. They're just sending content. And again, I think people get so freaked out, they don't want to be, an annoying email person, right? Because again, there's lots of examples of email done poorly. And so they're afraid to ask for the sale. So anyway, I don't see newsletters providing a ton of value for companies who use them to only deliver content. You can make a newsletter and have it be offer driven as well. But yeah, packing people's inboxes with more content when they're already inundated with that all day, every day. You have to be you have to help people focus. So keep it to one topic or one theme. And then always, 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 always tell people how to become a customer, right? Like, what's that next step? Uh, yeah, it's fascinating to me how many people forget that. Very essential piece. But when you're in your business all day, every day, it's very easy to be like, oh yeah, I guess they can't read my mind to know how to become a customer, right? So yeah, I get it. I've been there.
And then so with the newsletters then, because you said people send 5 to 7 pieces of content in each email, should they be breaking that newsletter up and sending multiple emails, or should they use that to whittle down to like the most 1 or 2 valuable pieces of content and sending them in an email instead? Like what should the approach be?
Yeah. So people are that. So what I often see is that people send that email once, right? The first of the month, they send their monthly newsletter. It's 10 million articles. What they could be doing is breaking that up into weekly sends with 1 or 2 articles each, right? But what I typically recommend is focusing on, again, one main theme, one major piece of content that's your primary focus, and then maybe provide, 2 or 3 supplemental pieces of content. And those supplemental pieces can be how to become a customer, right? Um, so, yes, breaking it up, sending more frequent emails with um, less content overwhelm is going to help you because that's a lot of time to spend putting together an email with all those pieces of content when you could be keeping your subscribers warm with more touch points and simpler pieces of content to digest.
So kind of what I'm taking away from this is that email hasn't changed dramatically for a lot of businesses pretty much ever. They're still doing it the same way they used to do it back in the day. So there's tons of room for innovation with email marketing. And I'm curious if you've seen any innovative products or email platforms that have come across just kind of your day to day. If there's any interesting platforms or things you could recommend for people listening.
Yeah. So, the next big thing is AI, right? Everybody's into the AI with digital marketing. And so email isn't any different. Um, there are tools that can, if you're an e-commerce company, Klaviyo is an email service provider, and they have like incredible AI, right? They have predictive data where they can say, somebody's going to be the most likely to purchase again in X amount of days or months or whatever. So that's really amazing especially for the price point. Um, there's in addition to that, like growing your email list is really hinges around the tools you have for collecting email addresses, and part of that are pop-ups. Again, it's something people are like, oh, I hate, everybody hates pop-ups, they're so annoying. And it's like, well, again, no, like everything, if you do it strategically and you think about your end user, you can do it in a way that's not annoying and actually helps you with your goals. So I use a tool called Pop Up Smart, and they can use AI to serve a pop up right when they think somebody's most likely to engage with it. So that's pretty cool. And there's just so many options you can do with that. Um, there's that. Uh, gosh, there's so many other. Oh, there's another one I use called Beacon. It can build lead magnets for you. They have a ton of templates, and they have forms built in it so that you don't have to use your email service provider if you don't want to. It's pretty fantastic. And Zapier. I mean, Zapier is my best friend. If I could marry Zapier, I would. Yeah, I mean, because that's the other piece about email is, it's great to be able to capitalize on data, but it needs to be organized and it needs to be integrated so that you're not downloading Excel files and uploading CSV files over and over again to your email service provider. So something like Zapier can do all of those things. It can pull all that contact information into your email service provider automatically without having to do all the bulk downloads and uploads. So it's a real game changer. If you don't have like a dedicated JavaScript guy on staff who can do all these custom integrations for you, it's pretty phenomenal.
You mentioned lead magnets there. So for people that don't know, lead magnets are things that you offer in exchange for someone signing up for your email to your email list. What makes this is probably a difficult question to answer simply, but what makes a good lead magnet?
Yeah, so one that it's so one that speaks to your audience, right? So knowing your audience really well to know that um what are their pain points and their aspirations and how can you help alleviate those pain points. So that's really uh and like what do people really really want to know about. But in the e-commerce world, a lead magnet is typically something really simple, like a giveaway or a discount. Again, it's something somebody wants, right? And it's going to push them over the edge to make a purchase. But in the B2B world, you're typically talking about content. And so something very short and simple and sweet that tackles or solves a common pain point for your ideal customer, not somebody you think you should be working with, but the people or not just the people that are coming to you, right? Who are not a good fit, right? Somebody who's your ideal customer. What are the biggest questions they're asking? What are their biggest pain points? And how can you attract them with something that A helps solve the pain point and B applies to your products or services, right? So it has to be very targeted and focused, and tantalizing for people to want to give you their email address, right? They're giving you their personal information, so you have to make it worth their while.
I have a quote here, speaking of making it worth their while, from you that I really, really liked. And it was customers want personalized content, but they don't want to be reminded about it. So customers don't want an email that says like, we saw you were on our website on Tuesday, December, whatever, from 2:51 to 2:53 p.m. on this page. So what are some ways you can personalize content in a subtle way that's not obvious? Like, hey, we're tracking you at all times, and this is how we know this.
Right. So you could do that, hey, we saw you browsing our website on December 31st at 12:45 p.m. That you can make it really fun that way, right? Like winky people, it's disarming, right? So I have done things like that, like we're watching you. Um, but you just essentially tailor your content or offerings and send it to that person without mentioning why. Just don't mention that you're watching them, right? I mean, we all know in theory everything we do online is tracked, right? We kind of get that, but we don't really know it until you start seeing things and people tell you, hey, we saw you do this thing, and you're like, whoa, wait. uh, but yeah, so sending them relevant content or offers based on those behaviors, again, without saying we notice, right? And also like using words like I and we. It's very company and brand centric. Like people don't care that you noticed. Right? What does it have to do with me? That's what people care about. So yeah, it seems simple, but when you're in it, it can be very difficult to make that leap to like think about what does the end user really want and how do I deliver it without turning them off. That's a very hard skill to develop.
With all this tracking and data that you have access to through email, is data privacy a concern or anything you have to worry about when it comes to email marketing?
Yeah, I mean, always. You know, you have to be concerned about data because you have people's contact information. And, depending on your email service provider, you might have the information about what they've purchased, and that might be sensitive information. Um, but yeah, you have to keep it on lockdown. It's like having any website data. And in particular, you have their contact information on top of it. It's not some anonymized database, right? Like who's been looking at what, when, and how. So yeah, absolutely.
Speaking of knowing what they looked at, when and how much are companies not taking advantage of abandoned cart emails?
Oh, yeah. shockingly so many. I mean, it's so funny because I'm like, I'll talk to somebody who's like either trying to reactivate their email program or optimize it. And I'm asking all these questions. Do you have this campaign? Do you have this campaign? And they're like, no, no, no. And as an email marketer, or as somebody who's just in your field all day, every day, you're like, wait, what? I'm always shocked, but I shouldn't be, right? Because not everybody knows this stuff. But yeah, so many people don't take advantage of the abandoned cart campaigns, and they're so easy to set up these days with email service providers. I should say, most email service providers make it very easy. Um, yeah, and when I had to set up my first one, I had to hack my way through the back end on that, and it took me forever. And now, like, yeah, there's no reason not to.
Is it true that you developed an abandoned cart campaign that was earning over $1 million annually?
Yeah, so when I had a large e-commerce client that we tested an abandoned cart campaign over the course of a year. Like, we tested everything: subject lines, images, copy, timing, and by the end of the year, I think we'd had like I want to say it was like a 15% lift in revenue year over year. And at the end of the year, it topped over $1 million just from that campaign.
That's crazy. And you mentioned testing there. We've talked about testing throughout. When you're testing things in email, should you only be testing one thing at a time? For example, because if you test an open rate and a click rate at the same time, the open rate might affect the click rate depending on how many people are actually opening it or not. So is it important to only test one thing at a time, or can you do multiple?
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking at a very specific metric, like opens or clicks, then absolutely. The problem then become the problem can become like, let's say you have a really old email template, right? That you've been sending forever and it's just been your standby and you want to refresh it. Well, do you only change the color of the font the next time, right? Do you only change the size of the graphics and test it against the old one, right? So if it can become cumbersome, right, to only test one thing at a time. So it depends on the question you want to answer, you know. So if you're talking about, well, what's it gonna take to lift our open rates? For sure, I'll only test the subject line. Um, because if you want to also test your call to action button design in the same email, you can't compare those results if you're also testing the subject line. So yeah. So in general, one thing at a time, unless it's something, that would be nearly impossible to do, like to come up to speed in your email marketing program quickly. That can be a drawback.
As we're kind of going through all these different email elements, I'm thinking in a B2C mindset, but we've talked about B2B a little bit, and you mentioned how it's completely different because it's more of a nurturing process because the buying cycle is so much longer. And I'm curious how with B2B, usually there's more decision makers than B2C. With B2C, the person reading email might be able to convert, but B2B, there might be higher ups and bosses that people have to go through. So how do you take that into consideration when you're crafting out these long nurturing campaigns?
Yeah, so essentially you're empowering somebody to be able to um, speak to a decision maker, right? So often what happens in the B2B world are the actual practitioners, like whoever is actually executing whatever the thing is that your platform does or your product or your service does, they're the ones who are going to sign up for your email list. And hopefully eventually they'll be in a position to make a decision about your product or service. But in the meantime, you need to be equipping them with the language and the tools and the tactics to be able to sell your product to the last decision maker, right? The person who's going to sign off on things. So your responsibility is to essentially equip them to be a salesperson. And so they need to know the value of what you provide. You need to give them a good feeling so that they stick around, help educate them, help them feel supported. Um, So yeah, and then all of those rhetorical moves you have to make in between. So there's a lot of opportunity there, and obviously you're going to send a lot more emails to get a sale, but that makes my job really interesting, so I like it.
And so when it comes to nurturing customers, even on the B2C side, do you there an opportunity there to nurture existing customers? Because I feel like when people think of nurturing a customer, they're thinking of nurturing someone to that first initial sale. But it's, from my understanding, cheaper, more cost effective to re-engage and nurture an existing customer already. So is that something you try to focus on as well?
Absolutely. So onboarding, right? Customer retention, there's this whole world of customer retention. And if you have a product or service that you're selling somebody, it can be difficult to get that second order, but not as difficult to get an order from a brand new person. So you want to make sure that people are totally satisfied with their purchase so that they'll come back, which means that sending email campaigns post purchase that encourage people to reach out to customer service if they have a problem, slash give them additional supplemental content to help them get the most out of their current product, their current purchase. So there's a lot. I mean, obviously it depends on the product or service, but like you still have to convince them of the value of the thing that they just bought, and make sure that they get the most out of it, so that they come back, right? So if they decide, hey, I want something else, or I want to purchase this again, you're the first person they think of. In addition to, like, there's also all this opportunity to upsell and cross sell your products and services. So, um, and you can tailor those based on previous buying history. So, yeah, it's all in the mix. The entire customer journey is there, and again, it's really powerful.
Mhm. And at the end of the day, what you're trying to do with your emails is you're trying to either establish or strengthen the relationship you have with your customer. And I'm curious, with on your personally with your business, is that how you've grown your company? Like personally on my side, I've grown my business a lot through the relationships I've made. So is that something you've experienced on your side? Is just the relationships you've built with your client is what's allowed you to scale your company?
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I did a lot of, back in the day, pre-COVID, I did a lot of, in-person networking locally. And it was amazing because I had just moved back to Michigan. I didn't really, I'm not from this side of the state. And so I didn't know really anybody besides my in-laws and my immediate family. Um, so I got to go out and talk to people and meet people and learn so many cool new things. And now, and those relationships have been like invaluable. And then, learned how to do that on LinkedIn. And it's still pretty cool because I get to learn a ton from people and meet some pretty phenomenal people. So yeah, scaling that way, and getting confident with, having, well, first of all, you have to get confident with the conversation of sales in general, right? And your business. And doing that in person was really helpful for me. And then translating that digitally to like LinkedIn, and my email list and all that kind of stuff has just exploded things. So it's been little baby steps to get there.
And with that face-to-face networking, it wasn't just like meeting people at coffee shops. You created a whole meetup group, right?
Yeah, so I did a lot of things. So I created, again, when I moved back to Michigan, I didn't really know anybody. I was working from home remotely by myself. I'd never done that. I've always thought I was an introvert and that I hated people until I started working by myself for myself. And then I was like, my husband would come from work and I'd just be like, I did it, I did it, I did it, And he's like, did you get out today? And I'm like, no, why? Why would you ask something like that? So I was going to hang out at coffee shops, just working, and I decided, and I checked out some co-working spaces that weren't really fitting what I wanted. So I was like, well, I'm going to coffee shops anyway, might as well post it online. So I started a meetup group, and I still have some very good friends that I met through that group that we still do virtual stuff. So Yeah, that was super beneficial. And I mean, yeah, and that's the thing about becoming an entrepreneur is like you have to put yourself out there. And I wasn't sure if I would like it or not. But it's actually been really amazing. I've met some really phenomenal people, and I would say I'm no longer an introvert anymore. And I would probably say a lot of people wouldn't consider themselves introverts after being shut in for so long anymore. Everybody's itching.
Yeah, no kidding. And do you think part of being an entrepreneur, especially a solopreneur, part that people don't talk about with it is the fact that it's lonely. It's you by yourself. And when you even add staff, like you're still the boss. So is part of building a community just helping with the fact that entrepreneurship is a little bit lonely?
Yeah, so yeah, that was the meetup group, and then I actually started another group of women solopreneurs locally, and we would meet once a month just to get support. Because sometimes, like, I there's so many things I've learned about myself since doing this, but one of them is like, oh, I'm a verbal processor. I need to talk this stuff out. And so just having somebody, again, who's not my cat or my husband, um, to talk through things, who are going through similar things is really helpful. And yeah, we've still in that group of women, we've still been meeting virtually through quarantine. So, and again, I've made some really great friends that way. So it's been, two birds, one stone. I love it.
So we talked about earlier how the entrepreneurship is a lot of highs and a lot of lows. What are some of those high moments you've experienced? What are some of those moments where you just get so excited when you think about them?
Yeah. So I I got featured on a panel of some local businesses. I was asked to be on a panel with some local businesses with brands that are known pretty well locally. And I was like so over the moon that I got asked to be on this panel because I was like, my logo is next to these other logos of these companies that people love here. And so that felt really good. And um, what else has been a really high moment? I yeah, so not saving enough. My credit card didn't like that. So being able to fix that was really great. And and yeah, just it's so weird. Actually, so there's a woman who I've been following her career for since I started email marketing, right? I found out about her. And as I got more confident doing what I do, we started being in the same email marketing circle. And then I got featured on a panel or a webinar with her. And I'm like, what is happening? It's just like, it's so weird to like feel this journey of like, oh, I do know what I'm talking about. And then to be recognized for that is very exciting and just weird. Um, and just like, and also having a team, like that's bonkers. I can't believe that. So yeah, getting to do all of those things is crazy.
I'm curious if we can dive a little bit in more of that feeling of, oh, I do know what I'm talking about. Is the imposter syndrome something you've had to overcome through your journey as an entrepreneur? I feel like that's a very common thing for entrepreneurs to go through.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, it's a real thing. And the thing that I keep realizing, as I, network within the email marketing community, and there are people who've been doing this a lot longer than I have, um, that who know more than I do, right? Or I thought they knew more than I do, but they just know differently, right? Like there are so many ways to approach a problem, and often there isn't one right way. It's just being equipped with the ability to ask questions and want to find the answers for them. And, eventually you make so many mistakes that you know what not to do the next time. And so I think that's probably where expertise comes from is is messing up enough to know how not to mess up again, which is not super sexy or cool or interesting. It's just like, oh yeah, I made that mistake. I've been there, just seasoned, maybe not expertise. But yeah, so I think what's really helped for me is networking with other email marketing professionals and like developing relationships and talking to people, because you realize like, oh yeah, there are things people know I don't know, and there are things I know they don't know. And that doesn't make us, one person more knowledgeable than the other. It just helps complete the puzzle, right? Because the puzzle's too big. There's not one person can know it all. And I can say that now, but next time somebody calls me an expert, I'm gonna be like, me. So yeah, it's a ebb and flow kind of thing.
How do you go about communicating to a client that you might not know something? Because I feel like, especially for solopreneurs or even just entrepreneurs in general, when you're working in a client relationship, saying I don't know about something makes you feel like you're putting your credibility on the line by saying I don't know. So
Mm,
how do you go about communicating that to clients?
I mean, usually I try to use I might use an educated guess, but usually that's qualified with like, I would assume this would be this, but I need to double check myself. I've also, and if I'm feeling in a particular punchy mood, it's like, well, I could make something up right now, but I'm not going to do that to you. So I'm going to go find out the right answer. But yeah, I think people appreciate transparency above bullshitting, like, and so I try to let people know like, oh, that one is something I haven't come across yet, but let me do some thinking about it.
And you mentioned
So
earlier about, sorry, you mentioned earlier about making those mistakes just as you progress through your journey. A mistake I made early on was setting non-distinct client boundaries. Is that something you've had to deal with? And how do you go about making sure that the boundaries are very clear? And how do you deal with scope creep from clients?
you tell me. I'm still working on that one. That's another thing. Like, I've just realized, boundaries are something I've struggled with, personally for a really long time. And, one of the catalysts for, and it's really interesting. So, when I became, or when I went out on my own, I also started EMDR therapy. I'm very candid about going to therapy. I mean, not to brag, but I've been in therapy a long time. um, but I started this new method called EMDR, where it's like, they process traumatic memories. And so I was processing all these memories that had to do with poor boundary setting. And as I'm processing those, I get to practice what it looks like, on the other side. And so that's been a whole other like fascinating journey. But really, it's saying, well, first of all, somebody asked me to do something that's out of scope, um, is I have to say, oh, wait, this is out of scope. Well, and you have to remember that it's out of scope too. So, like, documenting things, like being clear what deliverables are, and having that information in an easy, accessible location so if it's out of scope, right? Because it's hard to keep track of all these things all the time. So, that's one way. And, and yeah, just getting comfortable too with, just because I know how to do this thing doesn't mean I have to do it, right? If it's out of the original agreement. Because I'm like, oh, I know how to do that. Let me fix it right now. And, real quick. And like, oh man, I have to stop myself so much from doing that, and just being okay with that too, which is so hard. But in order for any of these relationships to work, they have to work on both ends. And yeah, it's setting the whole thing up for failure if I don't stick to that. But yeah, it's a total learning process, all the time, that I'm still learning, and tweaking and managing, right?
Have you ever had to turn business away because you're too busy?
Hmm.
Is that a hard thing for you to do?
Yeah, I still like have a really hard time doing it. I'm still like so in the mode of like, oh, you want to hang out with me? I want to hang out with you too. Let's hang out. Let's talk, instead of like, oh, I have things I need to be focusing on right now. Um, it's a whole mindset shift that I'm still working on. And I've set some things in place that make it easier, like canned emails and then I have like a directory I created on my website of people who do similar things that I can refer people to. And so it makes it very easy to say, oh, hey, I have this whole website listed of people who could help you if I can't right now. And you need help right now, right? So yeah, oh boy.
And another thing you have in place too is you have a new course in place too, right? So if you're busy, you can kind of push people there as well.
Yeah, I've got a few courses. I've got a signature course. So yeah, I offer people that help too if they want to, but often people are like me, course junkies, and they're like, I can't do one more course. And I'm like, I get it. I get it.
Well, what was the process of putting that course together like? Because I'm sure you're so busy just with clients in general. Where do you find the time to build a whole course on top of all that work that you're doing?
I did it on weekends. And yeah, and it did not lead to happy, fun home time. So yeah, I did it on weekends and evenings. And like I would carve out some time, a few hours, or maybe an hour or two a week to do it. And so yeah, it's a lot of work. And what's even more work is marketing that course. It's a lot of work that they don't like. People are like, oh, just build a course, passive revenue. And it's like, yeah, you still have to do a lot of work to get people to buy that course. So yeah, so much fun. But it was a great learning experience.
And you found that Pinterest ads is what's converting well for getting people to your course, right?
No, I have
No.
found, yeah, opposite.
Really?
I
Okay.
yeah, I have not gotten good ROI on Pinterest from Pinterest at all. I've tried like Facebook ads and Pinterest ads, and none of them have really worked for me. But I know people who've done it really successfully. But I haven't been able to really devote a lot of time to promoting the course as much as I would like to.
So right now, is it just kind of something in the background that you have to make available to people should they need it?
Yeah, and actually it's been a really great it's actually been really great for signing new clients. Because I offer them the course as a bonus, and if they have like a junior marketer on their team, then that junior marketer can go through the course and learn how to take things over when I'm done, if that's, part of the project. So yeah, it's actually been a really great bonus offer for clients who sign on for my services. And then now I'm just trying to figure out how to repack, or I'm working on refining the course and then like getting things in place so that I can actually promote it more without it taking up too much of my time. So that's a whole other, so many projects.
And talk to me too about marketing yourself. Like, is that something you're doing as well? You're just so focused on the business and the course, or I know you're pretty active on social media. I've noticed you've had a pretty big podcast push this year as a guest. So talk to me about marketing yourself.
Yeah, so that is a whole thing, right? It's hard to, I mean, like I come into work with a new client and they're like, oh, I don't like doing this and I don't know how to do it. And it's like, yeah, doing it for yourself is a whole other ball of wax than doing it for somebody else, getting that objectivity. And marketing myself has been like learning how to articulate what I do in a way that people understand, A, and providing value that people want. And also, again, like learning that confidence that like it's okay to talk about my work and what I do. It's not gross. It's not, a turn off. Oh, and like it's not going to come off as salesy, right? Like I think I had this mindset that to market yourself, like I just imagine some sleazy bro, trying to hype up all this stuff. And it's like, that's one way to do it. It is not the only way. And so like that, I mean, I had to go through a lot of coaching to work around and through those thoughts, to figure out how to do it on my own, in my way. And shockingly, people like it. And they're just like, wait, what? You like this? This is weird.
And so, what would your advice be for someone who's afraid of putting out content on their own? Is it asking themselves, what would Beyonce do? Or is it just starting? What should someone do if they're afraid to start putting out content?
I mean, obviously ask what would Beyonce do? That should be your first question. The second one is it's gonna be trash at the beginning. It's gonna not be great. And it's gonna be sloppy, and you're gonna look back on it in a year or 6 months or even 3 months and be like, I cannot believe I published that. I guarantee you, especially if you're doing it yourself. But you got to start somewhere. And, something is better than nothing, right? If you're not doing it at all, nothing's going to happen. Uh, so there's that. And I have seen people post terrible things. Like just scroll through LinkedIn. Seriously, get on your LinkedIn and just scroll, because some people are just, you're just like, that doesn't even make any sense. And I have no idea what's happening right now. And to me, that makes me feel better. I know that's really sad, but I'm like, if they're doing this and doing a very mediocre job, I can do it. And like, it's shocking when people start to really enjoy your content. And it's just me writing in my own voice. It's not writing for my old professors. It's me writing to real humans. And when I think about it as having a conversation, like just write about the conversations I'm already having with people, it's so much easier. Uh, so yeah, it's gonna suck for a little bit until you just hit the groove, and then it becomes a lot easier.
I'm curious what your personal email list strategy is, and two, what your opinion is on platforms like Substack right now, with a lot of people jumping on email to almost grow their personal brand just through writing their thoughts into an email and sending that to their list.
Yeah, so personal list building for my business has been, I mean, well, first of all, you got to drive traffic to your site, right? So efforts need to be focused on that. And not only driving traffic to your website, but driving traffic to your email sign up. So I have several lead magnets, that I've created. Just somebody says something, I'm like, oh, that could be a lead magnet. That could be a lead magnet. Um, but really focusing on the most popular one, like looking at the numbers, what's the most popular one, and pushing it like all of the time. Every opportunity I have, I mention my lead magnet. And people think that it gets repetitive. It doesn't. I include it. It's funny, last week or a couple of weeks ago. So in every LinkedIn post, I let people know, if you're looking for more, here's a few ways you can dig in. And one of them is my lead magnet that I put in the comments. And I had somebody comment on my LinkedIn post commenting frequently. And last week it was in the comments and they're like, this is amazing. I love this resource. And it's like, I know you've been hanging out here for a while and you're telling me you never noticed this before. Like, so it's pushing it. You have to push the lead magnet out. You can't just let it sit on your website and expect it to do its job. You have to give it attention, and even like run ads to it, um, pop-ups, the whole 9 yards. Like, you have to help people see it and focus on it. It's not a one and done kind of thing.
Where do you find the time for everything? What does your schedule look like? You have this business, all this content, your course. You're also a mom. What does your schedule look like? Where do you find the time for everything?
Yeah, I have to make the time. And honestly, like, I don't know about you, but I don't have much of a social life right now. So it gets really easy to like weekends and evenings just to be like, oh yeah, there's this thing I wanted to do. Oh, I have an idea. Let me do this. But lately it's been, I I noticed how like distracted I can be. And so like I've really had to focus on focusing. And anytime I have a new idea that I know I could do, oh, this will just take me 15 to 20 to 2 hours to do. I have to stop myself and put it in, like I use ClickUp for my project management, and I have like a whole list in ClickUp of just stuff I want to get done. And it's like, okay, it just goes in there. We'll revisit it later. It doesn't have to be done right now. So I think that's been the best thing for me, is like I need to focus. Just because I have an idea and I know how to do it doesn't mean I should be doing it. And I have to remind myself all the time. So I've gotten to a point where I've created so much content, it's very easy to recycle it. And so I've come up with a system to start recycling that content. So yeah, now I don't have to create as much new stuff. So yeah, yeah, focusing, recycling, almost. I think those are the two things. And I don't have much of a personal life.
Fair
Social
enough.
life, I should say. I have
Yeah.
a personal life. It's not social life.
And so what's next for you? What do you have coming up?
Yeah, so I'm working on my digital products, because I have a lot and I haven't been marketing them. And so that's a whole thing. So I'm setting up systems with my team. And I think that's the thing that's really going to help uh, be a catalyst for next year, is coming up with systems and procedures and getting everybody on the same page to be able to empower my team to do these things. So that's a big thing. So anyway, so I'm working on those digital products and coming up with the foundation to be able to actually promote them. Because I mean, I can market stuff all day, every day, but if you don't have it set up properly, it's just like somebody's going to buy something and they're going to be like, what the is this? You wanted to pay how much? And I'm not all about that life. So yeah, so that's next. And I don't know, world domination. Is that a thing that I can say is next? And then, oof, next year, so much social activities. I can't wait till we can do that again.
Yeah. Is your long-term goal still to open up a coffee shop slash bookstore where you do all the baking?
I wish. No, that sounds like a real quick way to ruin coffee shops and bookstores for me. Like people talk about doing your passion as your profession, and it's like, no, I don't want to turn a hobby into work. Um, yeah. Maybe I'll just build a personal library and have my own little espresso machine in the library.
How many times have you read the Harry Potter series?
I mean, at least 5, at least
That's amazing.
minimum. Yeah, my son is 3.5, and I just sat him down yesterday to start watching the first one.
Mhm.
He didn't really get it, but it's really an exercise in my own entertainment. So who cares about him? No. We'll get there. We'll get there. I just gotta be patient for him to start getting Harry Potter.
That's awesome. And before I let you go, I just want to ask you the same standard set of questions I ask everybody at the end of every interview. 5 questions. I used to call them rapid fire, but people tell me they're not very rapid fire type questions. So I started calling this the Q&A, but then I realized the whole podcast is a Q&A. So that makes no sense. So I don't really have a name for this section. But the first question is, you're going to dinner. You can take 3 people. It can be anybody dead or alive. Who do you take to dinner?
Oh man, that's a lot of pressure. That is a lot of pressure. 3 people I take to dinner. And again, like I kind of don't want to take like my heroes or famous people, because I kind of like the fantasy of who they are. But dinner. I mean, the first one that comes to mind is Barack Obama. Just because his voice, I love his voice. I wish he could read to me like bedtime stories. Um, Barack Obama and um, oh God, I'm already panicking. I'm panicking. Um, Trying to think, dead or alive. Okay, I'm also a big Jane Austen fan. I if she were resurrected for sure. Jane Austen, Barack Obama. This list is really basic. I'm already hating it. And whose brain do I want to pick? RBG, you know? Yeah, RIP RBG. I would love to have dinner with her. I mean, I get to talk. I'm like, oh, I should mention family, but I'm already spending enough time with them. Give me a break here. Yeah.
Yeah. What is some of the best advice you've ever gotten?
Oh, the best advice I've ever gotten. Um, okay, so when on my 30th birthday, my husband did this really sweet thing. He asked family and friends to write me letters giving me advice on my 30th birthday. And my sister, her advice was don't forget to moisturize your neck with SPF because nobody wants a turkey neck like Pamela Lee Anderson. Is she still Pamela Lee? Anyway, Pamela Anderson. And I don't take that advice, but I think it's pretty incredible advice. Like, who says that? Put SPF on your neck so you don't get turkey neck. I think about it often, and I don't even do
Yeah,
it.
that's awesome. What is one thing about you people wouldn't expect?
Ooh, one thing people wouldn't expect. Um, ooh. I used to be a very picky eater. I think that would be something which I'm only saying this now because I feel like karma is coming back around, and my son is like, "What? No, absolutely not. I'm not. He won't eat grilled cheese." I'm like, "I swear, you will love this. You just have to believe me." And I would imagine, I think I was probably like that when I was his age. So I've grown. I've grown a lot. Again, not to brag, but I've eaten a lot of things.
All right. What is one thing that's so important everybody needs to know about it?
Oh, so important. Everybody needs to know about it. I would say, uh, man, mental health, um, and stress and trauma. Like I have been learning so much about this in the past few years after like being introduced to EMDR, and like everybody's had a trauma of some kind, right? Like some are really really big, and some are little small traumas that build up, and it literally changes your body chemistry. I've been learning all about this, and it's just so fascinating to think about, people do stuff and you're like, why did they do that? What is wrong with them? And often like it's a learned response that you don't even realize you're doing it. And yeah, it's just fascinating. So everybody should learn about stress triggers and trauma, I think.
The last question, I like to flip the script a little bit. So instead of me asking the question, it's you asking the question, but it's not to me. So pretend you have a crystal ball and you can ask this crystal ball any question and you'll get the 100% honest answer. What is one question you want to know the answer to?
Oh man, I don't know. I don't think there's anything I want to know because that's too much pressure. I mean, I think of like big questions like what's the meaning of life? And what if the answer is like peanut butter?
Yeah.
I don't know that. That ruins everything. But the one question I want to know the answer to is um uh God, man. The one question I want to know the answer to is, I almost want to say what my future is, but again, I don't think I want to know. What if it's like everything is gone? What if the world ends in 10 years, you know? Um, 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 um. I've also been thinking a lot about, my lineage, and I think that's what I want to know what my great 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 grandmother was like. Um, but again, maybe I don't want to know that. So maybe I want to know that. Maybe I want to know something from the past. What was my lineage like? I'm gonna go with that.
I like that answer. But I want to thank you so much for taking time to be on this podcast. I want to give you the floor. Where can the people find you? Plug anything and everything you got right now.
Well, I am pretty cool. I hang out on the internet. Not a lot of people do, so I'm very elite. Come find me on LinkedIn. I hang out there a lot. I'm always posting. And if you are interested in, spoiler alert, lead magnet, I've got a free action guide on how to boost your email open rates. It's something people struggle with a lot, on my website, and it's at flourishgrit.com/open. So come out and hang out with me on my email list.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank you once again for taking time to be on this podcast. And I want to thank everybody for listening. Whether you've listened the entire way through or you only listen to bits and pieces, I really appreciate you taking time to check this out. Everyone, do me a big favor. Go and hang out with Emily on the internet. Go and subscribe to her email newsletter. I'll make sure everything's linked in the show notes down below so you can find it. If you'd like to follow me, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at the Jacob Kelly. Feel free to come and say hello. My DMs are always open. If you'd like to follow the podcast, you can find us on Instagram at My Social Life Podcast or YouTube by searching up My Social Life. As always, today's podcast is powered by Trufan. Thank you once again for listening, everybody. We'll talk soon.